They are members of
Senator Morris, we have been able to see the result of the Dokuno on that particular senator.
But, you know, there are senators who know my mother very well, you know, and I mean, I met Senator Scott Motley first through my mother when she was parliamentary secretary in the Ministry of Education, and she was a member. Connection between members of the Senate and my family, and I want to thank you all for your gracious words and support, and I will convey them to our family. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Morris, and I'll ask the clerk in the usual manner to just prepare for the purposes of your family's record the note and the Hansard report of our tribute and your particular tribute to your mom. Thank you very much. And again, before we continue the business of the day, one of our number, Senator Longmore, was recently re-elected, I noticed, as the president of the Psychiatric Association of Jamaica. So congratulations, madam, and keep up the good work. I had to point out to Senator Gale that it's not the Psychic Association, it's the Psychiatrist Association of Jamaica. And keep up the very good work. You know, I think now and again I claim the right to be able to say a few words, and I'll say it now, particularly with respect to the question of counseling and persons seeking counseling and psychiatric assistance at this time, particularly during this time of COVID. And to the extent that whatever I say here may be heard by one person, I will say it. We are going through in Jamaica and indeed across the world a very difficult time in relation to this COVID pandemic and persons who have lost persons close to them. I can tell you from my point, I lost my mother-in-law. And I wonder sometimes if the legal profession was particularly hard hit. I lost, for example, Bill McCullough, who is the husband of the former Chief Justice. He and I went to Jamaica College. I think Lambert was a class behind us, but we were there. From the first day I went to Jamaica College till I left, having done O-levels and A-levels together, which most of you don't even know what those exams are these days. But a man like Bill McCullough, so all of us have lost persons there and very dear to us. So there is no harm in seeking counseling, there is no harm in seeking assistance to unburden yourself. And today there is a plethora of persons who can offer such assistance through your church or your school or your community. So I encourage persons who are finding it particularly difficult and persons at every level of the society to seek assistance. And we also note that in the last couple of days, really, there have been reports of 2 attempted suicides or 2 suicides. So it's always important to seek some sort of assistance at every level, either through your church or through school, hospital, whatever. But seek assistance, and there is no shame in it. Statements by ministers. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the Senate today are the following. The Civil Service Establishment General Order 2021. Special report of investigation by the Integrity Commission concerning allegation of legal and or unregulated sand mining activities in the vicinity of the Jamaica Mud Lake in Hayes, Clarendon, and corrupt practices in the issuance of mining license by certain public officials, officers in the Ministry of Mining and Energy. Special report of investigation by the Integrity Commission concerning the circumstances which led to the approval and issuance of prescribed licenses and permits by the Ministry of Labour and Social Security for the construction, renovation and operations of the Moon Palace, Jamaica Grand Hotel, and the report of the Joint Select Committee on its deliberations on the Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures Act 2017.
Madam Clerk, the reports from the Integrity Commission are online. Because are we seeing them? Okay, all right, okay, thank you. Bills brought from the Honourable House of Representatives.
The following is a message from the Speaker of the House of Representatives. To the Honourable Senate, I have the honour to advise the Honourable Senate that on the 18th day of January 2022, a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Sisters of Mercy of Jamaica, British West Indies Incorporation and Vesting Law 1954, to make provision for the replacement of the officers which constitute the Sisters of Mercy of Jamaica, British West Indies, to make provision for the Sisters of Mercy of Jamaica, British West Indies, to be conferred with express powers to govern its management and administration, and to validate and indemnify acts carried out by the Sisters of Mercy of Jamaica, British West Indies, in good faith during the period commencing on the 12th day of April 1954 and ending on the date of commencement of this act, was passed in the House of Representatives. I also have the honor to advise the Honourable Senate that on the 25th day of January 2022, a bill entitled An Act to Temporarily Modify the Representation of the People Act in order to postpone the holding of a general election of members to serve on the respective councils of municipal corporations and a general election of the mayors of city municipalities was passed in the House of Representatives. Signed, Marisa Dalrymple Philibert, CD, MP, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Petitions? Senator Golin.
Mr. President, I signify my willingness to take charge of the first bill.
Thank you, Senator Golin Campbell.
A bill shortly entitled The Sisters of Mercy of Jamaica, British West Indies Validation, Indemnification and Amendment Act 2022, read the first time.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice of a second reading of the bill, and I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of standing orders to enable me to take the second reading of the bill and to take it through all its concluding stages.
Thank you, Senator Golden Campbell. Minister?
Mr. President, I signify my willingness to take charge of the second bill.
A bill shortly entitled The Representation of the People, Postponement of Elections to Municipal Corporations and City Municipalities Act 2022, read the first time.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice of second reading of the bill.
Thank you, Minister. Petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally, questions and answers to questions, motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice, motions relating to the sitting of the Senate, motions for leave to introduce bills, the presentation of bills without the leave of the Senate first obtained. Public business. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, it is intended today to take the Terrorism Prevention Designated Reporting Entity Trust and Corporate Services Providers Order 2022 and to take the Sisters of Mercy Bill, as we will call it, in brief. I will take the first matter, and Senator Golding, who was a member of the committee charged with review of the bill, will lead the debate on the second. Mr. President, once again, we have before us a matter concerned with the strengthening of Jamaica's financial systems and related non-financial systems, making them more robust and transparent such that they deliver better for Jamaican users. And it's important for us to recognize that an intrinsic part of their ability to deliver better for us is their compliance with international standards such that they are also trusted by international users. Great emphasis, Mr. President, has been placed by the international community on the fight against the twin evils of money laundering and the financing of terrorism. Money laundering, as we know, is essentially the process of hiding the illegal origin of funds. And terrorist financing is fundamentally the gathering or the provision of funds for terrorist purposes. And the problem cuts across borders. Criminals exploit loopholes in domestic systems to try to move their funds through or to jurisdictions with weak or ineffective legal and institutional frameworks. So strengthening our frameworks to protect and prevent these activities therefore plays the dual process or dual purpose of protecting us nationally and ensuring that we play our part in the global fight against these scourges. Mr. President, among the goals of the AML-CFT framework, so the anti-money laundering and counter-financing of terrorism frameworks, are 1, protecting the integrity and stability of the international financial system, 2, cutting off the resources available to terrorists, and 3, generally making it more difficult for those engaged in crime to profit from their criminal activities. As we in this chamber well know, Jamaica's compliance is important not only to businesses and to business communities, but to a wide cross-section of users at every level of banking services. Compliance creates trust, Mr. President, and trust in our system seeks to ensure matters as simple as if you obtain a credit card in Jamaica, that you are it is reasonably likely that it will be accepted by international businesses, that it will be accepted by different websites if you're seeking to do online shopping, and they're more likely to accept it than to reject it. It ensures that if you're sending a money order, or the number of countries from which or to which you can send a money order is as broad as possible. These are certain ordinary levels, or rather individual levels, at which one can experience trust or mistrust of a financial system. So strengthening our AML-CFT frameworks is work that benefits all of us. Regarding the specific order before us today, Mr. President, Section 15(2) of the Terrorism Prevention Act permits the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, by order subject to affirmative resolution, to designate an entity as a reporting entity for certain purposes under that Act. So having therefore made the Terrorism Prevention Designated Reporting Entity Trust and Corporate Services Providers Order, I am seeking the Senate's approval so that it may also be affirmed in that other place. By way of background, I wish to remind members that Section 14 of the Terrorism Prevention Act provides that an entity will be classified as a listed entity if it's designated as a terrorist entity by the UN Security Council, or if the DPP has reasonable grounds to believe that the entity knowingly committed or participated in the commission of a terrorism offense, or is knowingly acting on behalf of or at the direction of such an entity so designated by the UN. Mr. President, in either case, an entity can only be designated as a listed entity pursuant to an order from a judge of the Supreme Court based on an application by the DPP. Pursuant to the TPA, such an order prohibits dealing with the assets of a listed entity. And in this regard, I note that to date, all designations done under the TPA have been in respect of persons designated by the UN Security Council. So we don't have any listed entities that have been separately applied to by the DPP under the second limb that is created under the Terrorism Prevention Act. Mr. President, Section 15 of the TPA provides that certain entities, that is the reporting entities, and that they are at the core of this order, must periodically report whether they are in possession or control of property owned or controlled by or on behalf of a listed entity. So this is about managing circumstances wherein a reporting entity, so a trust or corporate service provider, deals with the property of a listed entity, that is a terrorist entity so designated by the UN Security Council. Reporting entities must also notify the FID, who is the designated regulator, where they suspect that a transaction involves property that is connected with or intended to be used in the commission of a terrorism offense, or is involved with or for the benefit of a listed entity or terrorist group. So as a function of Jamaica's integrated AML-CFT regulatory framework, a reporting entity on the TPA is also required to report whether it is in possession of property belonging to or connected with an entity in respect of whom there is an order under the UN Act regulations. And just to recap, Mr. President, I think there are more than 80 sanctioned entities and more than 200 individuals who are listed under the sanctions list as designated by the Security Council. Mr. President, businesses other than financial institutions and businesses in the financial sector may be designated as reporting entities under the TPA, as we know, because indeed this House, indeed our Parliament, has already designated categories such as real estate dealers, casinos, gaming machine operators, and accountants. So trust and corporate service providers are before us today. It's important to note as well the complementarity between this order and the proceeds of crime order that was approved last week. That was the proceeds of crime designated non-financial institution, trust and corporate services providers order. That order, together with the one before us, and the regulations forthcoming under the Trust and Corporate Services Providers Act, will facilitate the effective supervision of trust and corporate service providers operating in Jamaica. As we know, the trust service providers are defined under the Act which we passed last year, November. I believe it came into operation on December 24th after being passed in the lower house as well. That is where both where it relates to companies that are involved in the establishment of trust, the administration of trust, they act as trustees in particular circumstances. The services are defined under that Act, and of course corporate services also defined under that Act. Corporate services under Section 14, I believe, and trust services under Section 15. And the corporate services being those companies that administer incorporation services or administration of corporate secretarial or directorships on behalf of international entities or domestic entities. So, Mr. President, all of those together form a critical part of Jamaica's action plan that has been agreed with the Financial Action Task Force, the FATF. And that most recent piece of legislation, as we know, introduced several measures to address deficiencies identified with respect to Jamaica's efforts to comply with FATF recommendations concerning trust and corporate service providers. So, Mr. President, the Minister of Finance continues to lead the drive to complete the various initiatives part of the action plan, and the measures being pursued aim to strengthen Jamaica's financial systems, disrupt the financing of illicit activities globally, and more generally ensure compliance with applicable international standards. In fact, in recent months, as we have continued an assessment process internally and administratively with the FATF and the CFATF, Jamaica's efforts have resulted in the country being positively reassessed in respect of several deficiencies identified in our last mutual evaluation report. We still have a ways to go, and as I said, the Minister of Finance continues to lead the drive in that direction. But the order today before us will continue the process and will take us that much further forward. So in this context, I ask the Honourable Senate to approve the Terrorism Prevention Designated Reporting Entity Trust and Corporate Service Providers Order 2022. I look forward to contributions to the debate. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Bunting.
Thank you, Mr. President. This order is not controversial. It continues a long process of the government of Jamaica working with the Financial Action Task Force and the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force to continually strengthen and upgrade our laws and regulations related to the threats from money laundering and terrorism financing. In fact, there was a National Risk Assessment report completed in August 2021 last year that really reviewed our progress over the prior 3 years in attacking this threat. And if you look at what was called a sectoral heat map for Jamaica, it identified remittance companies as the highest level of risk and largely related to them being used by lottery scammers. And the second highest area of vulnerability was in real estate development. What is interesting is that I think we have a reporting requirement for real estate dealers, but I think there's a gap because many real estate developers don't necessarily go through dealers, go through the agents, but do the selling themselves. And it provides, I think, an opportunity for the construction financing to be used to launder illicit funds. And when these units are sold, then the proceeds coming to the banking system effectively laundered. And developers who have that in mind would have an incentive to use their own sales team and not go through a registered real estate dealer that has reporting requirements and therefore might flag some of this as suspicious transactions. So I would point out, Minister, the developers have come in for some scrutiny in the public domain recently, but for other things. And I think this is an area, as we continually tighten the regulations, I think this is an area that we should look at, bringing developers, not just dealers, but developers under the reporting requirements, given that it has been identified as one of the high-risk areas, or perhaps the highest risk area that currently doesn't have reporting requirements. The other area that jumped out at me as I was reading the National Risk Assessment report is the whole area of beneficial ownership. And we have been addressing beneficial ownership in some of our amendments to the Companies Act, etc. But even in looking at our statutory reporting under the Integrity Commission Act, both for parliamentarians and for public officials, if you look at the standard forms that we've been filling out, some of us have been filling out for a long time, you'll see deficiencies, for example, in that it doesn't deal with trusts that were set up where the parliamentarians or their families might be beneficiaries. Not necessarily that there is anything wrong with setting up trusts, because there's a legitimate role for trusts in terms of estate planning, etc. But the fact is, it's not captured now in the requirements for reporting under the current form that's there. Some of us, of course, go beyond what is required under law, and we declare any interest we have, any beneficial interest we have in those trusts, whether it's captured within the law or not. But I think for good measure, we should tighten that reporting requirement to include under the integrity, under the statutory reports, under the old Corruption Prevention Act, and now under the new Integrity Act, any beneficial interest that we may have in any of these trusts, any ultimate beneficial interest. And I think Jamaica is still on the grey list, Minister, one of the countries on the grey list. And obviously that keeps an urgency, makes it urgent for us and important that we continue this process. But just in looking at the countries on the grey list and in assessing the jurisdictional risk of these countries, it does seem to have a bias against the weaker countries in terms of their size and economic clout. Because when we do hear of the marquee cases of money laundering and terrorism financing, usually it is coming from the big money center banks with their headquarters in the OECD countries, not from local Caribbean banks. Yet it is the Caribbean islands, and especially the independent Caribbean islands, that seem, and other small jurisdictions that seem to feature on this, even though, to my mind, the jurisdictional risk must be very low, especially as you'd rarely hear of big money laundering cases involving these jurisdictions. I'm not saying they shouldn't fall under it, but there just seems to be an imbalance. And the goalpost keeps being moved for countries in the Caribbean, in particular, who go to great efforts to maintain compliance with a set of OECD or European Union regulations. And each time as they meet whatever that standard was, they move the goalpost again. And it makes it extremely difficult for small countries who really, in the scheme of things, provide no risk to the global system in terms of either money laundering or financing of terrorism. Very little, very low risk. But because you keep appearing on these grey lists, then the compliance department of correspondent banks say, well, is it really worth offering services to these little banks in these little countries, because they're just a headache? And in the scheme of things, you get filtered out, strained out in the de-risking process, and it really affects the efficiencies and ultimately the ability to operate of our local financial institutions. and it is a kind of global apartheid. It's a kind of global apartheid between the wealthy and the poorer countries, between the elite and the disadvantaged, in terms of those distinctions and the impact of putting these smaller, more vulnerable countries with weaker economies on these grey lists, no matter that they're constantly trying to comply with all the new rules, regulations, and the famous ladder of compliance with the Financial Action Task Force imposes upon us. But having said that, Mr. President, we support the continuing evolution of our framework for managing the risks of money laundering and terrorism financing, and the government has our full support in passing this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Bunting. Minister?
Thank you, Mr. President. And I thank my colleague for his intervention on this matter. It is indeed important that Jamaica continues to assess any gaps that may appear, and certainly where they exist in respect of real estate developers. I do recall hearing recently that, or it was being reported that some were being brought in for some investigations. But I was trying to find the story a while ago and couldn't find it to check what the matter was. No, it wouldn't be reporting. It wouldn't be reporting, but just in respect of, I know there have been some queries, generally. Right. But it is important. I do know, though, that the laws in respect of dealers and developers are up for reform, and that the matter of closing gaps which exist is one on the agenda. So that is that's a very important point which you have raised. And on the broader issue regarding the OECD and the EU and how it is that the matter of FATF compliance is addressed, Jamaica is quite clear. We have been working to comply. Whether goalposts have moved or not, we have been working closely in cooperation with them. We have taken the technical services that have been provided to enhance, and indeed the national risk assessment, which was finalized in August last year, was in fact one of the major planks for compliance, for us to be able to better monitor and manage within our resources. Many countries have not yet completed their national risk assessment, and that helps to focus energies and target to enhance compliance, and that has therefore helped us along the path as well. But we certainly advocate on behalf of other countries, and have continued so to do, within the context of the EU and in financial sectors, regarding how it is that these matters are addressed vis-à-vis other countries, example, territories which are not independent territories, where certainly there is a greater volume of transactions than practiced within the English-speaking Caribbean, for example, much less Jamaica in and of ourselves. And the existence of where fines are levied versus in our region where no wrongdoing has actually been found. But the reality is that the needle has not yet moved. We know that our voices have been heard, but the framework itself has not changed. We therefore continue to maintain our voice for equity within management of the global financial architecture, even as we work to comply to ensure that our businesses and our people indeed are not prejudiced in the path of advocacy. We continue, of course, to raise the fact that one would not want, especially in circumstances where de-risking had initially become such a red flag a few years ago, and banks were actively closing financial relationships across the region. we noted then and continue to remind that one doesn't want to, and it is not in their interest, to regulate to an extent that it drives transactions on the ground, such that it makes informality now incentivized and prevents even or rather causes greater non-compliance. And that, we think, that message had been heard and understood in the quarters where it needed to be. So we, as I said, continue to comply, to continue to work towards completion of all the elements under our action plan, including the order today. And in that context, I therefore thank the opposition for their support and ask, Mr. President, therefore, that the resolution placed before us in respect of the Terrorism Prevention Act, designated reporting entities, trusts and corporate services providers 2022 be approved.
Thank you very much. Members would have heard the motion, Terrorism Prevention Designated Reporting Entity, Trust and Corporate Services Providers Order 2022 resolution be approved. Those in favor? Aye. Against? Thank you, Minister. Senator Golden Campbell.
Mr. President, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take second reading of a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Sisters of Mercy of Jamaica, British West Indies, Incorporation and Vesting Law 1954, the of Jamaica, British West Indies, to make provision for the Sisters of Mercy of Jamaica, British West Indies, to be conferred with express powers to govern its management and administration during the period commencing on the 12th day of April 1954 and ending on the date of commencement of this Act, and to take it through all its concluding stages.
Members would have heard. Those in favor? Against?
Mr. President, the bill before us concerns the operations of the Catholic Order of the Sisters of Mercy of Jamaica. And if I can just give some context to this bill. The Sisters of Mercy established themselves in Jamaica as far back as the 1890s, and through the years have delivered yeoman service, particularly in the educational field in our country. For those of you who may not know, Jessie Ripoll Primary School, named after Sister Jessie Ripoll, who later became Sister Peter Claver. Sister Jessie Ripoll actually purchased the campus of Alpha on South Camp Road with her life savings at the time. And later on, when the Sisters of Mercy came to Jamaica, she actually joined the order. And the work of the Sisters of Mercy has been seen in several schools throughout our history. I'm a product of St. Catherine Prep School, where the Sisters of Mercy held the principal role and managed the school. St. Catherine High School, where our Prime Minister's alma mater is another such school. Of course, the infamous Alpha Academy and the Alpha Campus, the Alpha family of schools, the Alpha Boys Home, etc. So, Mr. President, the work of the Sisters of Mercy continues, and they still operate and are intimately involved in several of these schools. Mr. President, in 1954, the law that we seek to amend today was enacted to create a corporation that would subsist into perpetuity and facilitate the holding of real and personal property that was at the time held in the individual capacity of the then existing Sisters of Mercy. Well, it was thought then that that would create the continuity and facilitate the need to appoint new trustees over time. However, Mr. President, as time went on, difficulties arose, not the least of which is what is embodied in Section 3 of the Principal Act, which sets out that the corporate body consists of named sisters and attaches them to a particular office. What happened over the years is that those offices became defunct. They no longer exist. And so, as named in the Act, the local superior of the Convent of Mercy, the local superior of Mount St. Joseph Academy, the procurator of the Convent of Mercy, these offices don't exist anymore. And the trouble, of course, that presents is that the corporation has no human body who can act lawfully on its behalf. Mr. President, another significant issue that creates is that in Section 4 of the Act, which provides that gifted property bequeathed by will or otherwise gifted to the Sisters of Mercy through the church, is held by the corporation. So over the years, if people want to donate through their estate property to the Sisters of Mercy to enable them, assist them to do the work that they do, the transfer of that property is difficult because none of those sisters who were originally established under the Act are alive today. And so, Mr. President, the need for this amendment bill, and I take you now through the bill. Clause 1, of course, sets out the name of the bill. Clause 2 amends Section 3 of the Act, which is the section naming the persons I mentioned earlier, who were there declared and appointed as the body corporate. The amendment seeks to name 3 sisters in the Office of Area Administration, which is a current office, Secretary of the Sisters of Mercy of Jamaica, and 3 named members of the Institute of the Sisters of Mercy of the Americas, appointed by the president of that institute, and their successors to serve as the corporation. It also amends Section 3, subsection 4 of the Act by removing the requirement that the deeds executed by the corporation, that all deeds executed by the corporation are only valid if they are sealed with the corporate seal and signed by persons holding the 3 named offices that are now defunct. So that requirement for those 3 named offices has been removed, and it simply now needs 3 members of the corporation to sign. Clause 3 amends Section 5 of the Act, which sets out the powers of the corporation by adding to the powers already set out in the Act the powers to engage in and carry out charitable activities, to make bylaws, policies, and rules governing the constitution, management, operations, etc. of the corporation, to erect, construct, alter, and maintain buildings, work and plant machinery, to solicit, raise, and procure funding and financing, to draw, make, endorse, and negotiate negotiable instruments, promissory notes, bills of exchange, and the like, to invest and deal with monies of the corporation, to appoint and employ officers of the corporation, and to do anything and enter into any transaction necessary in the furtherance of the exercise of its powers. Clause 4 repeals Section 6 of the Principal Act, which stipulated that the Act applied to dependencies of Jamaica, which is, of course, no longer applicable. Clause 5 validates and indemnifies all acts done in good faith by the corporation, its officers, staff, and persons authorized to act on its behalf during the period since the enactment of the 1954 Act and this time. Clause 6 stipulates that all property vested in the corporation previously shall continue to be so vested. Clause 7 is the savings clause. With your indulgence, Mr. President. Yes. I'm sorry. Clause 7 is the clause which states that nothing prejudices the corporation from being registered as a charitable organization And Clause 8 is the savings clause. Mr. President, this bill was subject to a select committee of Parliament, and the members did not object to the amendments sought. I also served on that committee, and the amendment proposed by the committee were approved by the House of Representatives on January 18, 2022, and the bill as amended tabled in the Senate today. I thank my colleagues on the other side of the aisle for agreeing to table and take the bill today. And I commend the bill to this Honourable Senate, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Golden Campbell. In due course, Senator Campbell. Yes, thank you very much. Sorry, Senator Allen. You can go ahead now, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. No, I'm fine, thank you. Mr. President, I rise today to give full support to the bill that is before us today, and Senator Golding Campbell, who I sat with on the committee, helped us to appreciate just now the important work that over the years has been carried out by the Sisters of Mercy of Jamaica, British West Indies. It's so critical, the body of work that they do, and the influence felt so significantly across the country, and particularly in education, that I would like to use this opportunity to commend them for the work that they continue to do on behalf of Jamaica. You know, when we were called to debate this, or to as a select committee to review and listen to the recommendations of the Sisters of Mercy as to the amendments that they wish to see to the Act, it almost was a non-issue, and was probably one of the easiest bit of work one would have had to carry out, because it's so obvious that a law passed in 1954, which somewhat to this day, based on how things have evolved, it has limited the work but has not prevented them from carrying out the work that is in such great demand. There's no doubt about it. But what I want to point out, and just because of my newness in this chamber, my most memorable experience to date in this capacity was sitting in that committee and to see how, with such ease, we all worked together for something that was so obvious that could benefit Jamaica. In fact, when we were listening to the submissions being made, we almost wanted to write the submissions on behalf of the Sisters of Mercy to see how much we could make it better. And Senator Golding Campbell did lead that effort along with others in that committee. And it's just something that stuck with me, the importance of the collaborative effort and how much can be gained on behalf of Jamaica when we operate in such a way. So there's very little to discuss at this point other than to give full support to these amendments and to encourage other Jamaicans and other groups of Jamaicans to use the Sisters of Mercy as an example of how we can help to make Jamaica a better place. Because without asking, they have given, and without expecting anything, they continue to do even more. And if that is all that I can take away from this work, the work of that committee, then I would be a better Jamaican standing here in front of you today. So I give 100% support to this bill.
Thank you, Senator Allen. Senator Bunting, you wanted to say?
Yes, thank you. Mr. President, I'm happy to have the opportunity to rise to support this bill. It might surprise you, Mr. President, to know that I'm the beneficiary of a solid Catholic education and upbringing as well. And certainly whatever deficiencies I have has nothing to do with that. I take full responsibility for them. I'm not blaming them on my upbringing or education. But because of that, Mr. President, I really have had an opportunity to be very aware of some of the work that this order has done in Jamaica. And while the Kingston-based operations are perhaps better known, the Sisters of Mercy and Sister Susan Fraser's leadership now of the St. John Bosco home in Manchester has been really transformational, particularly in the lives of the boys who go through their residential program and have learned such valuable life skills. And you see the sacrifice that the sisters have made over the years. And while their contribution to education and many other charity works is known, perhaps less well known also is their contribution to Catholic theology and Catholic social teaching. Remember, Sister Mary Andrew was one of the group of priests and nuns, and I believe some lay people as well, who did a major overhaul and produced a work on I think it was titled The Catechism of the Catholic Church, and was published perhaps 20 or 30 years ago. But major inputs came from this little country through the scholarship of some of the Sisters of Mercy, and in particular, in that case, Sister Mary Andrew. So I think it is certainly an order that has made a tremendous contribution to development in this country, and that we should support in whatever way we can, and may they continue to provide service and be an example of what religious orders and religious organizations should be in service to the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bunting. No, Senator Brown, I know that you're not a product of a good Catholic education. I know that as a fact. So let's hear what you have to say.
Thank you for starting my presentation where I intended to start it. I'm certainly not the product of a good Catholic education. However, point made by Senator Bunting about sacrifice and charity of this group should not go unnoticed by us and by the rest of the society. Oh, I wish that their sacrifice could be replicated by those in corporate Jamaica who, at a time when the coronavirus have been hitting us hard, would show that sacrifice and charity in the way they treat their fees. I was tempted in the resolution earlier to speak about the terrorism felt by citizens as against the sacrifice of these sisters. The terrorism felt by citizens chased out of the banking halls into the ATMs, but for which there is no charity or sacrifice shown by the banks in the rapacious fees that they're passing on to the consumers. And I'm so
Senator
happy
Brown,
that these ladies...
Senator Brown,
yes,
you
these
know that
ladies...
I suspect that you're going to have a chance to talk about the banking fees another time, but I'm not going to permit you
I'm
to...
moving from banking fees.
I'm not going to permit
I'm
you
moving
to...
from banking fees.
I'm not going to permit you to continue. There is a
But
piece of legislation... Would you allow me to finish, Senator Crawford? I'm not going to allow you to continue. We're dealing with a particular piece of legislation. Senator Allen, Bunting, and Golden Campbell spoke eloquently about the work done by this charitable institution. I'm going to ask you, please, do not politicize the thing. Make we pass the
No, we're not
legislation.
politicizing anything.
No doubt the sisters are watching. Let us just go on. You don't have to go down the line.
I am praising their sacrifice and charity. And I'm sure
all I'm telling you, if you don't stick to the legislation, I'm going to stop you.
You can stop me because I've moved from the rapacious fees charged by the banks and the citizens. I just want to conclude by saying their sacrifice, their charity is supported by the Minister of Justice, the Minister of Finance, and the Prime Minister in their recent statements against the bank fees. May it please you, Mr. President, such sacrifice and charity of these orders of mercy is what the country needs, not the rapacious fees.
I don't even find that funny. Senator Scott Motley.
Mr. President, it was not my intention to participate in this debate, especially since Senator Golden Campbell has laid out the whole context so well. But what struck me when I was actually reading about the Sisters of Mercy last night was that the courage of these women. Just the fact that Jesse Ripoll took all of our life savings and put it into just serving others and making this kind of contribution struck me. And when the other women joined in, it demonstrates what we can do as women. Things that at that time were not associated with women. Because remember, we didn't even have a vote. We had to have property to have a vote. But these women were not daunted by how they were defined. And to read about the acquisition of that 40+ acres, and then to read about the sister holding the hand of one person, walking up to the property, and that was the start of an orphanage. It's such a powerful story, and it's such a powerful message to the rest of society as to how you can build a lasting legacy. I think, Senator Golden, that I read that your father was associated in some way too. You, I see. So, Mr. President, the fact that it has lasted and now they have, I think, 6 educational institutions, and the fact that so many people can boast about having passed through Alpha, it's like a badge that they wear on them. I want to commend the Sisters of Mercy. You passed through too? I want to commend the Sisters of Mercy for their lifelong dedication to uplifting others. And I support this bill 100%, Senator Golden Campbell.
Thank you, Senator Scott Martin. Senator Golden Campbell.
Mr. President, I thank my colleagues for their remarks. Just to say, the Sisters of Mercy have become a very small group today. Many of those who came have grown older, have passed away. So it's really a very small group of them that remain. And really, Sister Susan Fraser is the one who carries the mantle. And despite her own years, which I don't know, she exudes such energy and such commitment and such dedication to the work that they do. I was very, very pleased, honored, proud to have been a part of this committee, not the least of which is because of my own personal connection with the Sisters of Mercy. And if you will indulge me, I will share a story that Sister Susan Fraser, on the day that the committee was reviewing this bill, shared with me. And I now know it to be true because I had heard it within my family, and she repeated it as exactly as I heard it. And the story was that sometime in the late 70s, my mother went to St. Catherine Prep to Sister Colette Marie, who was the then principal, seeking admission for myself and my younger brother. And Sister Colette Marie was adamant that there was absolutely no space in the school. She don't have any more desks. She don't have any more chairs. I cannot fit them in anywhere. There's no corner to put them. Well, my mother, who I think many of you will know, doesn't take no for an answer very easily. And so off she went to the carpenter and built 6 desks. And promptly arrived at St. Catherine Prep School saying, here are the 2 desks for mine and 4 for 4 more, whoever you can take. Sister Susan Fraser repeated that story to me, and I had heard it exactly so. And there began a lasting relationship with the Sisters of Mercy. I was honored to have Sister Colette Marie mentor me throughout my adult life. I was honored to have her at the christening of my first child. Sister Pascal, who passed away last year, was a good and personal and close friend and mentor of my mother and my father. And so, Mr. President, yeah? Okay. The work of the Sisters of Mercy continues in earnest today, and they continue to work tirelessly despite the challenges of advancing years, despite the societal shift sometimes from charitable work and charitable contribution. They are not deterred. They serve their communities and the Jamaican people, and they continue to serve our beloved country. I just want to make one remark in relation to Senator Allen's comments. It is true that the work of this committee was particularly collaborative, and it was a very rewarding experience on that committee under the able leadership of our Deputy Speaker of the House, Mrs. Juliet Holness. And so I share your sentiment, Senator Allen, and I too hope that moving forward, that on both sides of the aisle, when we come to collaborate, that it will be done in that similar spirit. Mr. President, I commend this bill to the Honourable Senate, and I ask my colleagues for their support in its passage, as they have demonstrated they will do. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Golden Campbell.
Mr. President, I now ask that the bill be read a second time.
Members should have heard the question. Those in favour? Against? The Senate.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Sisters of Mercy of Jamaica, British West Indies Incorporation and Vesting Law, 1954, to make provision for the replacement of the offices which constitute the Sisters of Mercy of Jamaica, British West Indies, to make provision for the Sisters of Mercy of Jamaica, British West Indies, to be conferred with express powers to govern its management and administration, and to validate and indemnify acts carried out by the Sisters of Mercy of Jamaica, British West Indies, in good faith during the period commencing on the 12th day of April, 1954, and ending on the date of commencement of this act, read a second time.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The Senate will now resolve itself into a committee of the whole Senate to consider the bill clause by clause. No doubt with the warm and fuzzy feeling that I got from that debate we can take clauses 1 to 8, and I so put them. Those in favor? Against? I put the preamble. Those in favor? Against? I put the title and enacting clause. Those in favor? Against? The question is that I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendment. Those in favor? Against? I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendment. Minister, I'm sorry. Senator Golden Campbell.
Mr. President, I now move that the bill be read a third time.
The question is that the bill be read a third time. Those in favor? Against?
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Sisters of Mercy of Jamaica, British West Indies Incorporation and Vesting Law, 1954, to make provision for the replacement of the offices which constitute the Sisters of Mercy of Jamaica, British West Indies, to make provision for the Sisters of Mercy of Jamaica, British West Indies to be conferred with express powers to govern its management and administration, and to validate and indemnify acts carried out by the Sisters of Mercy of Jamaica, British West Indies in good faith during the period commencing on the 12th day of April 1954 and ending on the date of commencement of this act, read a third time and to pass.
Senator Golden Campbell, as Senator Crawford said, no doubt some of that applause a while ago was for the way in which you presented the bill. It was very adroitly and expertly done, and it is often said that the future casts its shadow into the present. So clearly there is a future for you there as a legislature. Minister, I think you have something.
Thank you, Mr. President.
And Senator Crawford, I would in the future allow me.
Mr. President, thank you very much, and may I just associate myself with your congratulatory words to Senator Golden Campbell. If I might ask, though, Mr. President, for the recommittal of reports from committees and notices of motion given orally on the agenda.
Thank you very much. Members would have heard the question. Those in favor? Against?
Thank you.
Reports from committees?
Yes. Mr. President, I beg to lay on the table of the Senate a copy of the report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to review the Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures Act 2017.
Thank you very much. Notices of motions given orally.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice on behalf of Senator Matthew Samuda that at the next meeting of the Senate, he will move the following motion. Be it resolved that the report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to review the Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures Act 2017, which was laid on the table of the Senate on the 28th day of January 2022, be approved.
Members should have heard. Those in favor? I'm sorry. Yes, go ahead, Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. And, Mr. President, it is not intended to do any further business today. We will, yes. Would you do the honors as a matter of national importance? Do you wish to move a motion on the notice of adjournment?
Thank you.
But, Mr. President, quickly to note. Just to say that next week we could probably try to address this as well as the ZOSO report, as well as the local government and the matter of national importance. As it will be the last sitting before the prorogation of Parliament, we could try to have those together. We could call it that we have time on the account from today's early sitting. that we have a little extra time to sit next week. Parliament will prorogue on the following Tuesday, and then we will, of course, have the ceremonial opening on Thursday, the 10th. Thereafter, we know that the budget debate starts, but there may well be, usually there's a hiatus at that point, but given the urgency of some legislative matters, it may well be that we will be asked to sit, notwithstanding the budget process. So we will of course, communicate on that, but I just signal, although I will ask for the Senate to be adjourned for a date to be fixed, just putting on notice for the agenda for next week, which will have two substantive matters. So thank you, Mr. President.
Just before we go, I don't want to embarrass our own Jermaine Luton, but last week, Friday, I attended the passing of the baton, the leadership of the Jamaica Defense Force, to Rear Admiral Wins Gorman, and to our delight, our own Jermaine Luton. Stand up. Second Lieutenant Luton. He was an integral part of the parade and was the suppleton to, I beg your pardon? Exactly. Precisely what you were. To the guard of the 9th Division. And I can tell you that he did himself and this Senate proud. Congratulations.
President, since you have raised it, may I indicate that he's a past student of Clarendon College and that I was his head girl, and add my congratulations to him. We're very, very, he has made the Senate proud, and he has, of course, made me especially proud.
And you know, I'm not going to let it pass, but suppleton is the pronouncement, is the pronunciation that I'm accustomed to. Subaltern. What you are saying is what? Subaltern. There you go. There you go. Regardless of what it is, we were very proud of you. The Speaker and I were very proud of you. This Honourable Senate will now stand adjourned for a date to be fixed.